Hi, everybody. This is Andrea Paquette coming to you from the Stigma-Free Mental Health Society. I'm super excited to have you here today watching or listening to our Stigma-Free Voices podcast. You can find us on Spotify, on our website, stigmafreementalhealth.com, YouTube. And if you're watching this on Facebook Live or after, please do feel free to share. And today I am super excited to have Ashley Buckner with us. And Ashley, where are you tuning in from? And just say a quick hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I currently live in St. Petersburg, Florida. So definitely some warmth down here.
And funny enough, it's actually pretty warm up where I am in Saskatchewan, Canada. You wouldn't think that it would be, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to where you are. But it's really great to be having you tune in from the States, and very excited for our conversation today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm just going to read your bio so people can get a sense of who you are, what you do, what your passions are, and your work. So does that sound okay?
That sounds fabulous. Thank you.
Okay. Ashley Buckner is a licensed clinical social worker, clinical supervisor, national and international speaker, and founder of Anchor and Rise Therapy and the Anchor and Rise Academy as well. She is licensed to practice in 41 US states. That's impressive, making her one of the most widely licensed clinical social workers in the country. With nearly 2 decades of experience in behavioral health, Ashley specializes in trauma treatment, substance use disorders, grief, and end of life care, and also complex mental health presentations. She is a master accelerated, I was going to say accredited, accelerated resolution therapy art clinician and provides therapy as well, clinical supervision and training to clinicians nationwide. Ashley as well has been accepted to present at conferences across the USA and also internationally, where she speaks on trauma treatment, clinician resilience, and innovative approaches to mental health care. Through her work, she is passionate about reducing stigma, so we have that in common, and especially around mental health, expanding access to trauma-informed care, and supporting the next generation of clinicians. So welcome. I absolutely am astounded by your bio. This really shows me you are very dedicated and passionate about your work. And I'm super excited to share some questions with you and get right into the conversation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, so you're licensed across many states and work nationally. How does that broad perspective shape your understanding of stigma in mental health care and access to services?
So one of the things that I've discovered is not only do I practice across the country, but I've also lived across the country too. Decided to do RV life, so kind of moved around a little bit. And what I found was that there are so many cultures and beliefs, and mental health is still not as accepted as it should be. And so it is my goal, it is my mission to not only find out kind of what the barriers are, but to break those down and be able to say we all have to deal with that. So that is I've found that living in Florida is very different from even where I grew up in South Georgia in the swamp. Very different from New Mexico, where I lived, California, northern Minnesota, West Virginia. So I found that all of these places definitely have their own beliefs and barriers to accepting mental health as a mainstream concern.
Yeah. Well, how do you find it different? Like, say, one state to another state? Like, what are you seeing?
So a very interesting place that I lived was in northern Minnesota, and there were a lot of different groups there. I lived near 3 Indian reservations. Also, we had a large Amish population. We had a large Scandinavian and Norwegian population. And that was very different from me being from the South. For example, I'm used to a very expressive life. Everyone is very, where I lived, were very loud and they were very expressive. And when I took that piece of me to northern Minnesota, people didn't know what to think of that. It was a little different. And so I found that there was a lot of times that when I would talk to people, they would say, I've never shared this with anyone. I've never talked about this, because you kind of kept things close in the area that obviously that's not all spaces there, but the area I lived in, people really kept things close. And so this may be the first time they'd ever told someone.
Yeah.
And so and then I found in the South, people would say, oh, I'm so stressed out every single day. And then people maybe didn't take that as serious because that was just part of the conversation. So definitely a difference there in how the approach was to even speaking about your feelings.
Okay. I find that so interesting. And yes, it's different across states and cultures and how people experience mental health, whether they're talking about it a lot or little. So yeah, you definitely would have that larger macro lens, which may
Yes.
be very interesting for you and
Yes.
help inform your work in a way that's so effective, right?
And that's really where you have to meet people where they are. You can't just assume that because they're in a certain area or because they look a certain way that they
Yeah.
express themselves or even are heard in the same way. So really kind of finding out about those systems is very important.
Yeah. Oh, I love talking about mental health in the sense that I feel every time we talk about it, we break down the stigma even more. And I wanted to focus in on you provide clinical supervision and consultation to clinicians across the system. So, what kind of stigma do providers themselves, not stereotyping, but maybe generally, or things you have seen? So, the stigma that these providers may carry, and how does that impact the care they give?
Absolutely. So, you know, our universities equip us in a way to work with people, but we are not an assembly line. People, one after the next, no one looks the same. So I think really being able to have clinicians say, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? Asking people about where they come from, what they believe. I think that sometimes we as clinicians don't do that. We make a lot of assumptions based on where someone lives or what religion someone presents as, or gender, or even their orientation. Like we make assumptions across these spaces, and we don't take the time to actually speak to people and find out what lens they're coming from. And so when I work with my supervisees, when I work with companies, and especially my clients, I want to make sure that we are really practicing cultural humility. And in that means you are not an expert in anything but yourself. And so asking someone, being able to be open and really asking them where they come from, what they believe, what kind of treatment they want. I think that is huge. And I think
Yeah.
we as clinicians sometimes miss that. And that is a huge, also it's really detrimental to the clients because they don't get what they need. They need to tell their story.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that personal touch and that introspection, understanding that we only know so much, we have our own lived experience and we can relate to others, but taking the time to really get to know their situation and who they are makes such a difference, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so with your background as a master certified addiction professional and international certified alcohol and drug counselor, what are some of the most persistent myths or stigma around addiction that you wish would disappear?
I think that these are bad people. I think that is my biggest one. That someone that there are a lot of addictions out there, and a lot of them we don't talk about, we don't discuss. But the reality is, there's sometimes, well, most of the time, there's a much deeper situation, whether it be a trauma or whether it be something genetic, whether it be situational. I don't think that we need to classify these people as bad people. We need to treat them as humans and really see them for where, for who they are. And I don't like the term addict or these negative
Mhm.
terms. It really kind of stigmatizes people in a way that is not okay. And so to be able to say, you're human just like me. What would you like to get out of this? What would you like to see your life like? I think that's really the hope that we need to start instilling in people. That's the reason a lot of people don't get help. There's so much shame and grief around and stigma around addiction in general. So being able to meet them where they are and just see them as humans and to work with them in that way I think is amazing, not only for the clinician, but in a much bigger term, definitely for the client.
Yeah.
That's how we
Yeah.
get help.
Yeah, exactly. Removing that shame and knowing that there is help and hope. And yeah, I really appreciate your perspective. And, another area where there's a lot of stigma is around death. So switching the conversation over to this death, dying, grief. It affects everybody and how we cope at the end of life, whether it's for our loved ones or our own. So, you're a certified end of life doula. Like, this is very interesting to me. And many people don't even know that an end of life doula exists. Maybe you could just briefly touch on that role that you do play and maybe a little bit about the stigma around death.
Absolutely. So, I have always been very, very interested in grief and loss. It has just always been a passion of mine, and not, but also, just when life doesn't look like the movie version. And so those things have always been a big interest to me. But I worked a lot with end of life in hospice. And what I found was that people had a lot of regret, not only of what they did, but mostly what they didn't do. So they
Mhm.
didn't necessarily live their full life in the way that they wanted to, and that's a kind of a recurrent theme that I see. And I would work with individuals and families that did not discuss death.
Mhm.
I know that in the area I grew up with, that was not talked about a lot. And ours was from a religious space where I grew up was you can't speak these things into existence. So no one talked about them, and then everyone was left in a major crisis when something
Mhm.
happened. So a certified end of life doula, not only do I work with the clinical piece as a clinical social worker and work with the emotions around that, but an end of life doula does a lot of things. We do a lot of legacy planning. So maybe what you want to say to your friends and loved ones, that's so important. There's a lot of things that people don't know how to say. And so I help them be able to say those things or leave the legacy in the way that they would like. That can include writing obituaries, actually planning your funeral. So you're in control of your life, your entire life, and no one else is having to make those big decisions for you. Um, and that creates a whole nother trauma of I don't know what
Mhm.
so and so would have wanted. We didn't talk about it. How do I manage this? But also sometimes for me that means sitting with people at the end of their life, sitting with families in those spaces. It's a very sacred work, a work that I hold very dear, and so I just love being able to kind of fully mind and body be able to help people in that space. Um, and you asked me a question about did you ask me about the stigma? I'm sorry, I got caught up in my answer.
Yeah. No, I love it. No, I really think it is important to talk about the role and why it's really important to you. But there's a lot of stigma around death. And you mentioned that. And I was just wondering that stigma around death, dying, and grief, how it affects people at the end of life. And I think you did talk about that. But if you wanted to add anything, that'd be fine.
Yes, I would love to. So I do think that I do think that we don't talk about it in the way that we need to. We don't. for lots of reasons. We don't want to speak it into existence. We don't want to think about the fact that this could be a reality. We have no idea what our life would look like without this major person that has been involved. So lots of things that kind of avoidance in a way. And one of the biggest things that I hear is that time heals all wounds, and that is completely untrue. So a lot of times when someone passes, especially where I grew up, everyone brings the casseroles, everyone hugs you, and they say, I am here if you need me. And they mean that. They really do. They have the best heart behind that. But after a week, the calls stop. And after a few months, people stop talking about them. And we don't want to say anything because we don't want to dig up an old wound. But in a way, it feels like that person's kind of disappearing. And we hate that. And so I think this idea that it's not talked about is awful. My favorite TED Talk says that we don't move on from grief, that we move forward. And that's very, very prolific to me. And I believe that, and I teach that to my clients and honestly to my family. They hate that at family dinner I'm like, hey, have you thought about this? And I'm not trying to be the negative Nancy, but I am trying to be the person that lets them have control of their life, their entire life. So I like to just create death cafe type experiences where they're very casual and we talk about the hard things, because I think that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. And that's how you eliminate stigma, talking about the hard things.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So moving on to trauma. So in your work with trauma and life transitions, what does stigma look like when people are high functioning, so on the outside, but struggling inside?
Yeah, so I mentioned the movie version, and I want to explain that a little bit. I do a lot of work around this. So everyone has a movie version of their life. We all have a way that we think it's supposed to go. And for many of us, for most of us, I find that the movie version is not our reality. Our hair looks different. Our financial situation may look different. Our relationships may look different. Our medical and mental health could look very different. There's a whole lot of things that could look very different. And I think what we don't discuss is the trauma that's behind that. And there are so many people that are walking around with things that have happened that have absolutely devastated them. And they're told, keep your head up, send it to the universe, pray about it, whatever it is, and keep moving. And that sounds really great in theory, but it's not practical. And those traumas, those differentiations between the movie version and the reality version impact us every day. They impact how we interact with other people. And honestly, how we function. We might get through the day, technically, and fall apart when we get home, or we might not be able to feel anything. Those are traumas, and I think those need to be discussed, understood, and there's been so much work done with trauma therapy that something that we can do to help with trauma. And like accelerated resolution therapy, you don't have to keep retelling your story. It's one of the reasons that I love it. But being aware from a trauma lens that this is happening, and it's happening to everyone, especially, well, not especially, to include everyone, even those high functioning people. We all have our stuff, right? Yeah. So really recognizing that, I think, is important.
Yeah. So talking about, you've referenced the dash poem in your work, the idea that what matters most is the dash between our birth and our death. So how does that philosophy influence the way you approach therapy, grief, and living fully?
Much to my mother's dismay, I even got a tattoo of it. It says "Live the Dash." I love it. And I am such a believer that no matter how long or how short our life is, we need to have the control. I know I keep mentioning that, but I really feel like so many people don't have that. And so what that looks like, it doesn't mean going on lavish vacations. It doesn't mean, um, doing all the big things. I think what it means is making sure that every day counts, making sure that our relationships are what we want them to be. And if they're not, how we're navigating that space. That we are not feeling like one day I'm going to do this and one day I'm going to do that. My personal reason for this is because my father passed away at a young age. He was 56. I feel like that's super young. And the thing that was so difficult about that was all the things he planned to do. And not just the big things like going trips here and there, but also, how to fix relationships in our family and mending some of those spaces. And so I really live and teach, what impact did you have today? Like, did you go to the local park that other people travel out of state for, or out of country for, because there's so much beauty around us? Did you live today to the fullest? Did you say today what you wanted to say, just in case there's not a tomorrow? Living your dash fully is very important.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I love that you have a tattoo of it too. It shows your commitment to that beautiful philosophy.
Yes.
So thanks for sharing that. So next, from your supervision and consultation work, what do you see clinicians needing permission to talk about more openly, but often feel stigma keeps them silent? So how does that happen for them?
I think that clinicians really need to talk about the fact that we have our own stuff. My favorite professor said to us, he said, I want you all to go to therapy. That's your assignment. We were all like, us? What do you mean? We're going to be therapists and we're going to change the world. And he said, first of all, never tell anyone to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. And the second thing is, we all have our stuff. So I've always lived by that, to let our clients know that we are not these perfect people up here that are helping them, that we ourselves need someone to go to, someone to talk to. So really being vulnerable to the fact that we aren't just fixing other people. We are literally just walking alongside them as they heal. And we're healing ourselves. And not only by walking beside them, but also having a person that walks beside us. So I think that is something I really teach to my supervisees, and I even speak to universities and at different conferences about this, to be vulnerable in this space. So you're not obviously sharing your entire story with someone. You don't want to overload people in that way that are coming to you for therapy, but you want to be okay with the fact that we all need somebody.
Yeah, that's so true. And doing life on our own is really not doable, right? We all need support. And so I see how communities showing up for each other and people, yeah, that's very valuable and a good point to
You
make.
can't be an island.
Yeah.
It sounds fun, but you are not an island. And I actually have that phrase on my wall of, you are not an island, because we get so caught up in helping other people that we forget that we that are holding space also need a space held for us.
Yes, exactly. Okay, in closing, my last question, if you wanted to leave listeners with a stigma-free message about mental health, grief, addiction, or end of life, what would you want people to hear, especially those who may feel unseen?
Please connect with someone. There are so many cool opportunities to connect with someone that are not going to cost you anything, that are not going to be like life altering in a financial space. There is peer support that is out there. I'm actually working with a great agency out of the UK, which is really cool. They're kind of all over. And so peer support is amazing. Finding a space, whether it be, someone you trust, or using your employee assistance program to get free therapy. Always check into that, because that is an option. Finding maybe it's your church, but finding a space for you. We cannot hold everything on our own. Life is hard and we need to talk about it. I used to tell my daughter when she was little that people are kind of like volcanoes. Enough stuff builds in there and it's going to come out. So whether it comes out in the meltdown phase of us isolating or crying, or the explosion phase of us being so angry and yelling and cussing, or my personal favorite when we're doing the combination of both, we need to let that out in some way. And so really relying on others, and there's also I want to say this too. There's a really cool TED talk about grandmothers on a bench. And there was a gentleman, that a psychiatrist, that actually taught grandmothers how to just listen, but they also had a space for themselves. So I want to say that you can make so much impact just by being there for someone else, but also allow others to be there for you. My grandmother would say, don't steal someone's blessing. So allow someone to be there for you in the way that you are being there for them.
Yeah. I love how your family inspires you so much. It's very beautiful. And thanks for sharing today. Is there like a website or social media or anywhere people can find you?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me at anchorandrise.net is my website. And also I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram under Anchor and Rise Therapy. I would love to connect with you. And I definitely thank you so much for this time and what you're doing to reduce the stigma.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's what we do and love. And stay on the line, and I'll say a proper goodbye to you at the end. We are coming to a close of our Stigma-Free Voices podcast. Everybody, once again, please share, like, all of those good things. Check out Ashley's website, social media. This is really important conversation, dispelling the stigma. It's not just about mental health, but it's also about death and conversations and addictions and so much more. And I'm just so glad that we were able to cover this much ground today. So thank you, Ashley. I hope everybody has a beautiful day, and take care, everyone. And remember, live stigma-free. Thank you.